All right, guys. So the full Big Ten future 2024-2025 schedules have been released. And what an amazing gift conference realignment is. There are some great matchups with USC, UCLA. It's really what we want with college football is just more big time matchups, the expanded playoff. Teams can lose and it doesn't end their season. I think college football is going to get a lot better in the long run. Even though the conference does look ridiculous with two Californian teams, this is the first thing I'm going to be looking at. It is the three common or fixed opponents for 2024 and 2025. And I'm just going to roll through these. And then we actually do have schedules in 2024 for a number of the bigger schools in the Big Ten. So I'm just going to see who got screwed, who got lucky with their opponents for 2024 and 2025. They will be facing, it's like a home and home with all of these teams. So you'll be facing them both years, one time at home, one time on the road. Illinois gets Northwestern, Ohio State, and Purdue. Obviously, Ohio State, very tough there, but it is what it is. Illinois, I think, is going to come down to earth this year. Indiana gets Maryland, Michigan State, Purdue. Not a hard slate, but Indiana is routinely one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. Iowa gets Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin, and those are all protected opponents for Iowa, so they will face them both years and beyond 2025 as well. You know, those are all decent teams. I would not want to face Wisconsin in the coming years with Luke Fickell, especially on the road. Maryland gets Indiana, Michigan, and Rutgers. That's pretty easy outside of Michigan. Michigan gets Maryland, Michigan State, and Ohio State. So a little bit of a mixed bag. It's kind of hard to judge what Michigan State's going to be. They've really struggled, especially last year. But Ohio State, obviously the rivalry. And then Maryland should be kind of a cupcake game for them. Michigan State gets Indiana, Michigan, and Penn State. That is brutal if you're Michigan State, both Michigan and Penn State. At least you avoid Ohio State, but still that's tough. Minnesota gets Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin. That is tough as well. We'll have to see what Nebraska is with Matt Rule. Nebraska gets Iowa, Minnesota, and UCLA. Kind of an interesting schedule there. Very average. No horrible teams, but no great teams. Facing Iowa on the road is never fun. Northwestern gets Illinois, Ohio State, and Purdue. That is still at the old Ryan Field before they move into their new place in 2026. Ohio State gets Illinois, Michigan, and Northwestern. So Ohio State got a very good draw there. Really only Michigan they have to worry about. Facing Illinois and Northwestern in both 2024 and 2025 should be relatively free wins. Penn State gets Michigan State, Rutgers, and USC. So I would say very balanced. USC is going to be tough. That's a good home and home. Rutgers is a free win. Michigan State seems, pretty free right now, but maybe they'll improve in the coming years. Purdue gets Illinois, Indiana, Northwestern. Rutgers gets Maryland, Penn State, UCLA. That's a tough draw for them. UCLA gets Nebraska, Rutgers, USC. USC gets Penn State, UCLA, and Wisconsin. So, yeah, USC really gets screwed here, man. They got hammered. They got Penn State. UCLA is beatable, and there's really no travel there, so you like that. And we all knew they were going to be one of the common opponents or whatever because the travel is so short. But then Wisconsin as well. So those are three tough teams, at least two tough teams and one average team. And then Wisconsin gets Iowa, Minnesota, and USC. And they kind of got screwed as well. I mean, Minnesota is decent, but Iowa's tough, especially on the road. And USC is... but we're just going to go through some 2024 way too early schedules. You have Ohio State really taking the Michigan model and scheduling nothing here. I hate this non-conference schedule. Southern Miss, Western Michigan, Marshall, the first 3 weeks of the season. This is virtually exactly what Michigan's 2023 schedule is. I mean, those are just, Marshall's at least... there's just no way Marshall's going to beat Ohio State. And then they're at Michigan State, going to be favorites in that one. At Minnesota, Illinois, Iowa at home, Michigan at home, Northwestern at home. That is an easy schedule in 2024 for the Buckeyes. The only really crazy hard game is at Penn State. That might be a whiteout, but outside of that, going to UCLA, they have attendance problems. There's going to be a lot of Buckeye fans out there. That is a very nice setup for the Buckeyes in 2024. Michigan's 2024 schedule, Fresno State at home to kick it off. Fresno State's not bad. They get Texas at home. They'll probably be facing Arch Manning. And then they get Arkansas State a few weeks later. That's a free win. At Illinois, that's an easy win. Maryland at home, Michigan State at home, Minnesota at home, UCLA at home, Wisconsin, and then at Ohio State, at Rutgers, at USC. Those are some brutal games. On the road at Ohio State, at USC, and then versus Texas, and then also versus Wisconsin. Michigan's 2024 schedule, significantly harder than Ohio State's, kind of an opposite of 2023. So that'll be, we'll have to see how that sets up, but that is a very, very interesting theme there. Penn State's 2024 schedule, they start on the road at West Virginia. That's not an easy game, but they're going to have more talent, and they should have a returning quarterback. Bowling Green at home, Kent State at home, free wins. And then you've got at Indiana, Michigan State at home, Nebraska at home, Northwestern at home, Ohio State at home, USC at home. On the road at Purdue, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. That is a tough conference schedule. You get Ohio State. That is a tough one because you're on the road at Wisconsin. You get Ohio State and USC at home, but still pretty tough. You need to win that first game at West Virginia. If I'm Penn State, I think they did a very smart thing scheduling West Virginia in a home-and-home series. West Virginia is good enough. They'll be a good opponent to face, but they're not going to beat you. They just don't have the talent. So it's such a good home and home if you're Penn State. Of course, maybe Penn State will lose to them, but I don't see that happening. Michigan State's 2024 schedule, they get Florida Atlantic, Louisiana, at Boston College. That'll be a random game there. That might be a home and home. And then their conference schedule at Maryland, at Michigan, Illinois at home, Indiana at home, Ohio State at home, Purdue at home, Rutgers, and then at Nebraska and at Penn State. Seems like a pretty average schedule, but we don't really know what Michigan State's going to be. They're not recruiting well enough, in my opinion, especially with USC joining the conference to really be considered any type of threat. And then this is USC's schedule. This is a brutal schedule for USC. There is no question. They get a neutral site game with LSU that should favorite them because it's in Las Vegas, but LSU, they always have a ton of talent. That is going to be a ranked matchup, I'm sure. That is the Sunday night game, opening weekend in 2024. San Jose State, that's a free win. But then, all the way November 30th, their other non-conference game is Notre Dame. It is at home, but that is a brutal non-conference schedule. LSU and Notre Dame. The only positive is none of them are on the road. And then their conference schedule at Maryland, at Northwestern, at Penn State, possibly the whiteout game, at Purdue, at UCLA, and then they get Illinois at home, Iowa at home, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So you're talking about LSU, Notre Dame, at Penn State, Michigan, and Wisconsin. What an amazing home schedule that is at the Memorial Coliseum. If you are a USC, season ticket holder, you get to see Michigan, Wisconsin, Notre Dame. Those are some really, really Iowa as well. That's a tough schedule. That is without Caleb Williams too. But I think they have another 5-star quarterback coming in. USC does with Lincoln Riley, but still, that is a tough schedule. UCLA's schedule for 2024. So this team is going to be doing a ton of traveling because they start at Hawaii. And Hawaii plays at that complex. They don't have an actual stadium right now because Aloha Stadium is in a state of disrepair, and they moved on from that in 2020. Fresno State at home. Fresno State's not terrible, and then they're at LSU. So I guess LSU faces both UCLA and USC in their 2024 non-conference schedule. That's strange. And then their conference schedule at Indiana, at Iowa, at Michigan, at Rutgers, versus Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Ohio State, and USC. So we're looking at like a 5-7 type season, maybe even 4-8. You've got at LSU, Fresno State's not a pushover at home, at Iowa, at Michigan, versus Ohio State versus USC. Also, I would say Nebraska and Minnesota at that point might be improved. That might be a 6-6 type schedule for them. That is brutal. This is Iowa's, so they start Illinois State, Iowa State in the rivalry game, Troy. Very, very easy non-conference as long as Iowa State's not that good, but that's always just a ridiculously boring, low-scoring game. Their conference schedule at Illinois, Maryland at home, Nebraska, UCLA, Wisconsin, at Minnesota, at Ohio State, at Rutgers, at USC. So yes, that's if you're Iowa, that's tough. You're on the road at USC and Ohio State. That is not fun. Those are the type of teams you're trying to avoid. Nebraska, they get UTEP in a random home game to start the year. Colorado, that's the second half of that home and home. Northern Iowa, so that is a very easy, if you are Nebraska and you have a decent 2023 season, it looks like you can build upon it. That's a very easy non-conference. Then they're at Iowa versus Indiana versus MSU versus Minnesota versus Wisconsin, at Northwestern, at Penn State, at Purdue, at UCLA. That is a very manageable schedule if you are Nebraska. Maybe this year they turn it around a little and your really only horrible games are at Iowa and I would say at Penn State. You can beat UCLA on the road. It's not a terrible environment. There's a lot of easy home games if you are Nebraska looking to turn around your program. That is a very doable schedule to win 8 or 9 games. Minnesota's schedule, they get North Carolina at home, Rhode Island, and Nevada. So I guess that North Carolina game's probably a toss-up. Drake May's not going to be there, though. Then they're at Indiana, at Michigan, versus Iowa, versus Northwestern, versus Ohio State, versus Rutgers, at Nebraska, UCLA, and Wisconsin. That is a brutal schedule. You're facing Michigan on the road, Wisconsin on the road, Ohio State at home. That is not, and then at UCLA, that is not fun. And then Wisconsin's schedule, so they start with Western Michigan, South Dakota, and Alabama. The Crimson Tide. No, wow, I didn't even know that home and home was a thing. Alabama is going to Wisconsin in 2024. That is obviously a very, very hard game for Wisconsin, but that's going to be huge for their program. I would imagine that would be a 7:30 game on ABC or NBC with the new package they're doing. And then the conference schedule at Iowa, at Maryland, at Michigan, at Nebraska, at USC, versus Indiana, Minnesota, Penn State, Purdue. That is a brutal schedule for Wisconsin. Alabama at home, Penn State at home, on the road at Michigan and USC and Iowa. Those are some really, really tough games there. So the takeaways, I would say the biggest winner of this release was Ohio State. When you look at the common opponents and you look at their 2024 schedule, it's very watered down. And then USC has a very, very difficult 2024 schedule. You look at the 3 opponents, Penn State, UCLA, Wisconsin. Those are all, especially Penn State and Wisconsin, tough teams. So that's just my takeaways from looking at this. The conference definitely got better, and this is exactly what we need. We need to see more big games. We need to allow teams to lose games in the regular season, and it's not going to kill you from making the playoff. There was people that were originally arguing, no, that's what makes college football great. It's the idea of, if you lose once, you're done. Yeah, but then that enables horrible scheduling. That enables what the SEC does to where they have 8 conference games in a 16-team conference. You don't want that. That is not what you're looking for. You just want to see good games every week. If your team loses, it is what it is. Life is too short to watch 4 games that are non-competitive. It's just, so I like that there's bigger games. Ohio State's 2024 schedule is not good. But overall, it is going to be good to see matchups like Ohio State in the Coliseum, Michigan in the Coliseum, Ohio State at the Rose Bowl, UCLA going to the Big House, USC at the Whiteout. That is going to sell. That is amazing for college football. And this should be good for the Big Ten. So, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.